Hi guys, it was good to see you all last week. I will look forward to seeing you all again on Wednesday. As promised, we are 1 or 2 lessons away from having completed the Anglo-Saxons course. So hopefully you're all up to speed with the previous stuff we've been looking at about Aethelred and his dealings with the Vikings, and you're now ready for the last few little bits of content before we can move on to coursework. So, what we're going to look at today is the same as we've looked at, for most of our other kings, is we are going to have a look at Aethelred's law code. And this is an odd one because obviously pretty much everything we've said about Aethelred was, oh god, look how useless he was at dealing with Viking attacks. But the thing is, he's king for 37 years. Alright, yes, it doesn't end too well, and there are obviously a few little bumps along the way, but actually he is king of England, indisputed, for quite a long time. And in that time, he does quite a lot of he passes a lot of law codes, and he actually makes some progress in terms of the law. So that's what we need to look at today and think about kind of how effective he was at legislating, how effective his law codes were. Okay, so first sort of thing to say is basically Aethelred's law codes he doesn't make a huge amount of change to things, alright? So in the past we've seen Athelstan changing the roles of Ealdorman, enhancing the role of the Reeve, all of that kind of thing. There isn't a lot of that really during Aethelred's reign. He's got quite a strong base to begin with from his dad Edgar, so really it's a lot of continuity. So we don't need to look at what's going on with the individual structure of government really here. I say a lot of that continues into Canute's reign. It continues beyond that. Even the Normans, when they invade in 1066, a lot of the Anglo-Saxon government and structure they continue with. So really, Aethelred's main contribution is law codes. Alright, so none of these are particularly groundbreaking either, but they do have a lot of interesting elements to them that we need to think about. So he's king for just under 40 years, so that means there is a lot of time to pass law codes, and he passes 10, okay, which is what we're going to look at today. So let's think about, okay, so he's issuing a lot of law codes. What aims is he going to want to address here? What is he going to want to legislate about? Obviously in the past we've seen Aethelred. What's he dealing with? He's trying to rebuild his country. He's trying to, recover and strengthen after years of Viking attacks. Ethelred, he's actually had quite a long period of stability before he becomes king, because his dad Edgar did a lot of work in that sense. So maybe his priorities are going to be a little bit different, and they're going to be more focused about immediate issues as opposed to recovering from things that have previously happened. So let's think about what he's going to try and achieve here. Okay, so number one, peace and stability, obviously. He needs to keep things stable, and he is dealing with a pretty much relentless Viking onslaught, so he's somehow got to respond to that and keep his kingdom safe in the face of that. He needs to promote the church. Okay, we've just seen quite a bit, just before he sort of takes over when he's a very young boy, there is all of that drama, that anti-monastic crisis, when there's basically a civil war between people that want reform and people that don't. So the church has had a little bit of a beating, actually, quite lately, because so obviously Edgar did a lot of effort to reform it, to make it stronger. It then got ruined a little bit by some of that anti-monastic reform. So he's going to want to address that. He's also going to want to continue strengthening the church for the same reason that even Aethelred did, which is they believe to gain success against the Vikings, you need God on your side. So potentially the church is going to need to be looked at in order to meet that aim. Other sort of issues are going to be economic. Okay, so we know he's paying a huge amount of money to the Vikings. Okay, we know the Danegeld tax is instituted in 1012, and even in the years before that, they're paying huge amounts of tribute fairly regularly. So the economy is going to need a bit of a boost. All right, they're going to need to somehow keep it running and sort of working effectively in order to fund these enormous enormous programs of tribute paying. And of course, even if we ignore that, he's got to pay somehow to defend his kingdom and restore defences and equip soldiers and things like that. So trade and the economy are going to be critical, and all part of that is obviously coinage. Okay, particularly if you're paying all this tribute, you don't want to undo all the good work that's been done by your predecessors in terms of centralising control of who can make coins and things like that. You want to control the coins, and we've discussed this previously, because the person that controls the coins controls inflation, they control the price of things, they control what people can buy. And obviously that's critical. If you want to have control over what goes on in your kingdom, having that economic degree of ultimate kind of oversight is going to be super, super important. All right, so controlling the coinage, making sure you don't have random people kind of devaluing it or making their own coins, stepping on your toes, that's going to be critical. We also need a fair and a more efficient legal system. All right, this is, something that obviously he's dealing with some pretty thorny issues in terms of betrayals and obviously dealing with Viking disputes and things like that. So the legal system needs to be kind of looked at. And the other thing, of course, is that, as we've seen over and over again, these kings, they really think that the effectiveness of your administration, so the effectiveness of your laws and the justness of your laws and the way that things are working as they should be, they think that is directly linked to how much God is going to be on your side. All right? They believe that if everyone's doing what they should be doing, the legal system is as fair as possible, that's going to get God on side. Now, when you're being attacked by Vikings for 37 years, you want God on your side. So that's going to be a priority. So, those were his aims, and I just want to bring in a key figure here that we have mentioned before, which is the new Archbishop of York, a guy called Wulfstan II. Now, he's not Wulfstan I, he's not the same one that kept sort of switching sides when Aethelred was king and sort of, ended up getting demoted. He's quite the opposite, really. He's very sort of fanatically committed to his job and his role, and he's also incredibly powerful. All right, so from 1005 onwards, he personally writes the law codes. All right, and he does that supposedly on Aethelred's behalf, but he is still pretty much having oversight of them. And as you'll see when you look at those law codes in a minute, you'll be able to see his hand coming through quite strongly because there's a lot of religious kind of prioritization in there. Now, the main thing Wulfstan did, he's nicknamed Wulfstan the Homilist because he wrote a lot of homilies. Now, a homily is like a sermon. So if you think when we go to the church at Christmas, St. Michael's, and the vicar kind of gives a big long sort of monologue, a big long speech with his sort of message for the day, that is a sermon. Okay, now, in this period, obviously everyone went to church, and a good sermon was almost something that you could, that you really wanted. Who's good at writing a sermon? Who can write a great little address for the vicar to read? The priest. So in this case, Wulfstan, he was quite sort of renowned for being great at writing sermons, and most of his are all about the Antichrist. Okay, so remember there's this kind of millennialist idea that potentially, because it's 1,000 years since Jesus came to earth, so we've had 1,000 years of, a golden age of relative peace when everyone's believed in the right thing. And now, potentially, Jesus is going to come back for the second coming. But before Jesus comes back, we have that time of tribulation, that sort of horrible time of war and famine and pestilence and all that. And that's when the Antichrist comes. Okay, and then Jesus has to come and fight him. So Wulfstan, amongst other millennialists, during the time of Aethelred, because there is all this strife and sort of drama and violence and misery caused by the Viking attacks, they believe that is the Antichrist. They believe that is the Antichrist on his way. This is the time of tribulation. Very shortly, Jesus is going to come back, but we've got to get through this horrible bit first, and we've got to make sure we're on the right side. Okay, so when Jesus does come to fight the Antichrist, they're going to be on Jesus' side, on his good side. So that's what his sermons were about. It's about how can we be better? How can we make sure we come out on the right side of this sort of eternal conflict between Jesus and the Antichrist? So one of those, very famously, and you've seen this in a previous lesson, was called the Sermon of the Wolf. Okay, and that's him, Wulfstan the Wolf. All right, that's kind of his nickname. And basically, it's a massive long rant where he goes on and on and on about how the English have lacked moral discipline and they've done bad things, and that has upset God, and therefore God has sent the Viking raids. Okay, God has sent the Viking raids to kind of herald the coming of the Antichrist. And you've got 30 years, Aethelred's reign, of Vikings coming constantly. And Wulfstan argued that is because the Antichrist is on his way, so you better sort yourself out. All right, you better be behaving correctly. So a lot of his law codes have that same sort of theme. We need to sort ourselves out because the end of the world is approaching. So, in Aethelred's law codes, we see a lot of his sort of strategy against the Vikings. All right, so there's lots of comments about tribute and how it's going to be collected. There's a few little bits about how to interact with the Vikings after various peace treaties have happened. There's also a few little sort of elements, little tweaks that are quite positive and sort of unrelated, such as he brings in the first sort of jury system. So if you know what a jury is, 12 of your peers get to decide if you're guilty or innocent in a court case. Aethelred introduces the first jury, okay, to try and make things fairer. So that's quite a big, that's quite a positive step, isn't it? And the other major thing that we see in this law code is a real importance of the church, okay, and making the church better, okay, and therefore defending yourself from Viking onslaught, okay. So what you're going to do is, we've just talked about all these different aims that he has, okay. You are going to read through a sort of summary of what is in each of those 10 law codes, and you're going to use that to complete this table, okay. And what I will say is the Word document version is designed to be printed on A3, so you might want to sort of fiddle with that before you do anything with it, because it may not let you print it otherwise. But I've given you a PDF, so you can print that, or of course just draw the table out. It's up to you. So you've got these law codes. We're not going to look at all 10 of them, we'll be here all night, but we've just got a selection of the most important ones. Okay, for each one, you're going to tell me what was going on at the time. So if you look, these tend to come out at sort of key points. So if you think 991 or 994, that's that early peace agreement with Olaf Tryggvason. Okay, 1008, that's the year after Tostig came and attacked. 1009, that's the year Thorkel turns up. 1014, that is the year that Aethelred just comes back after having fled the country, because Sweyn has just died, so he's able to come back. He gets invited back, in fact, by his nobles. So give me a little bit of information about the context, what's going on at the time. Okay, and obviously there is information on the law codes, but if you want to use that big timeline I emailed out last week, that would be helpful. And then in these columns, these are his aims, these are the things he's trying to achieve. For each law code, tell me in what way does that law code help each of these things. So for instance, if it does something about paying tribute, we would probably put that in peace and stability, because that's all part of that process, okay, and so on. Obviously, if there's nothing in there about a specific thing, so boosting trade is only really in one or two of them, so if you are reading a law code where that is not relevant, you just leave that box blank. Alright, so you only add things into the boxes where they are relevant, okay, where you can find evidence within that law code. Okay, so that's your job today. We're going to talk about this on Wednesday, so please make sure you have got this table completed for that. All right, and yeah, and I'll speak to you then. So usual thing, I will see you at 11 o'clock. I'll put the link on Show My Homework, but it will be the same one, because I've sort of scheduled the meeting weekly now, and it should just recur. So you should be able to use the same link as normal, but otherwise it will be on Show My Homework. Okay, guys, so if you have any questions about any of this, please do let me know, and I'll catch up with you in a couple of days. All right, thank you.